Parenting's hard, you don't know what to do. You're blaming your kids, but it's probably you. You love your kids and that you can trust. Just remember your kids don't suck.
Welcome to Your Kids Don't Suck, cultivating closeness with your children through non-coercive conscious parenting. We're your hosts, Cara Tedstone and Rythea Lee. Let's dive in and grow together.
Welcome to another episode of Your Kids Don't Suck. And if you've made it this far, hopefully your kids are sucking less and less in your mind. We have two special guests today, and I get to introduce them because I brought them here. This is Rythea talking, in case you're wondering. So I was thinking this morning while I was doing my dishes how, we think of the word heroes, and it's kind of this grandiose thing with our culture that's so into celebrities and people who get big awards and stuff. But sometimes the heroes in your life are the people you're closest to. And so, I'm gonna cry. So, I'm introducing one of my best friends in the whole wide world, who is like my family for a really long time. And I guess I met you when I was, 20? Do you know how old I was, Naomi?
Yeah, you were
I was
20, 21.
I was 20 or 21. I was a little baby. And this is Naomi Sparrow, who I'm introducing, who is my best friend and for a very long, long time, and her daughter Maggie, who's like my niece. And I met Naomi at a time where I really feel like my life could have gone off the rails. It was going off the rails. I was a trauma survivor, and I was fleeing my family of origin. I really felt they were going to come after me, and I was so terrified and so alone. And I met sort of just the right people at just the right moment who caught me. And Naomi is one of the major people who actually taught me what I didn't know what racism was. I didn't know what sexism was. I didn't know what homophobia was. I didn't even know what gay people were. I didn't know anything because I'd grown up so sheltered and so abused. And Naomi very, very patiently and lovingly said, okay, here's some books you have to start reading. I started with Audre Lorde's books. That's how that started. My life began to change. And so then Naomi had Maggie way before I had my daughter. And Naomi was raising Maggie in a way that I truly, truly did not understand. I didn't have a kid, and I'd never seen anyone do it this way. And I just thought she was too loving, too kind, too patient. And what was her fucking problem? Like, Maggie'd been crying, and now she'd been crying for over 5 minutes, and now you have to say, okay, enough crying. Jesus Christ. And I'd look at her and be like, what's your problem? Why aren't you being an asshole? Now's the time to be an asshole. And that felt so, familiar to me. I didn't really know anything about parenting, but this was really out of the box. And so I would say Naomi was the first non-coercive parent I ever met and was close to, and we didn't call it that, and she didn't call it that, and she's going to tell you more about that. And then Maggie is a person who grew up this way. So wow, we have a real live person who's actually lived their whole childhood being loved as a whole human being. And what's that like from the child's perspective? We never get to hear from the child's perspective. We always hear from the parent who's like dying, trying to stop being so controlling. And so, yeah. So this is Naomi Sparrow and Maggie Marsden Sparrow. Is that right? Yes.
Yeah.
They are Canadians. They live in Ontario.
Quebec.
Right.
I think for me, it's just such a cool experience because, when I started doing this parenting thing, I really didn't expect it to be like this. Like I did not set out to be an alternative parent or to have I didn't think about parenting at all. I went into becoming a parent with complete naivete. I thought childbirth was going to be like easy because I'd read spiritual midwifery. I thought I had rose-colored glasses on so thick that I remember walking down the street when I was close to term, and women would give me these looks, they'd give me this like, like warrior, like, I see you, look. And I'd be like, what? Like, I didn't get it at all until I got into the actual real experience of being a mom, that is childbirth, and actually a baby that cried constantly and never slept. And, the beginning of the shattering of my sense that I was a separate person. And that experience just, it was so intense. And then I began to understand, like, why when I told my mother that I was pregnant, she kind of went pale and looked terrified, because it's such a challenging thing and can be so isolating, especially for women and for people trying to do things like be authentic. And so for me, I had no idea. Maggie let me know from the get-go that she was different. She was a completely different baby than I'd ever met. And I had no idea what I was doing. And so I really just, in a way, was like trial by fire of just trying to be myself. And so this experience here of having it come full circle, to have, my bestie, this person that means the world to me, Rythea, kind of really create this space, not just for, obviously this isn't for Maggie and I, it's for like, the world, but to have my fabulous divergent daughter, suddenly have this, like, it's a value instead of being this thing that we're struggling to like protect. Because I think my journey as a mom, in terms of parenting, I didn't have language for what I was doing. I was just trying not to be a jerk. I was just trying not to, hurt her and get away with it and then justify myself. So this experience for me of being like, that here we are and we're being like, I don't know, we get to talk about it in a community, in a context that values this, is just, it feels like magic sprinkles on top of something,
I love that.
So
what do you feel when you hear your mom talk about the journey? What's that like for you?
It's very interesting because my perspective of it was very different, given that I was a child. But at the same time, I do remember a lot of solidarity, I guess, in the journey, because it was so like out there and different in terms of like, people's judgment of it. So like I remember a lot of people being weird about me and you, and hearing like conversations talking about like me as this sort of entity, like the way that I was being parented as this sort of like over there thing. And I'm like, I'm right here, guys. I'm hearing you talk about this in relation to me.
What did it look like? Like, what was so different about you all?
Right. So when Maggie was a baby, she cried a lot. She would be like a high-knees baby. I struggled for language. Day 2, she started crying. By 6 months, if she cried too hard, she would projectile vomit all over the place. So by the time she was like 6 months old, she had me trained. I was completely attentive to her. And most people, like, I'd never met a baby like that. I could not put her down. My first clue was when she was an infant, and we went to a party with all the other kind of new moms in our little mom group. And they all like had their babies in little buckets and whatever, the baskets on the couch. We had a friend whose baby was so mellow, they would just leave him on the couch. He was the same age as Maggie, like 3 weeks different. And they just walk away for like hours. They come and chuck him under the chin and he goo goo gaga, right? And I remember he started crying at this party and they were freaking out. They were like, he's having a meltdown. And his crying was like, it was this gentle, soft little crying, and he never cried. So they were freaking out. And I remember like looking at, Maggie's dad, Alan, at the time and being like, oh my God, like we're in a different reality from everybody else here. Because Maggie cried, and when she cried, it was like her head was going to explode. Like she cried for hours every day. And it was just like, you couldn't put her down. You couldn't. So it was just right out of the gate.
I had
it was
a lot to say.
And I couldn't, when I handed her to other people, I swear she would be enraged with me afterwards. She very quickly was like, I prefer you. And so as things progressed, because I was the one that, so I was a somatic movement therapist by training. I had a degree in anthropology, and I was deeply devoted to like liberation, theories and anti-authoritarianism. And, I have a history of trauma. And so I had early experiences of being deeply controlled and coerced by people who were, without a doubt, projecting their extreme distress on me and justifying that and getting away with it. And I had no recourse. And so I was deeply devoted as a person to these core values that were about liberation and, authenticity and creativity. And so I had this child that was like incredibly beautiful, incredibly engaging. Like when we walked down the street, people would stop, all the old grandmas, everybody would stop us and be just like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful baby. But she was amazing as long as she was with me. And so I had a good few years of having no idea what I was doing until I discovered a book that literally fell off the shelf on me as I was reaching for a different book. And it was a book on attachment parenting, on the history of attachment parenting, sort of like intellectual or whatever, like a literature review. And I just, was the first like weighty book or intellectual thing I read. Maggie was like 3.5 at that point. And at that point it was like all I knew is that I loved her more than anything else on this planet. And I could tell when she was being hurt. And I would do anything to not have her be hurt where it could be avoided. And I certainly didn't want her to be hurt and then have people validate and justify that what they were doing was actually good for her, when I could see that it was mostly their distress and arbitrary. I also was doing counseling, like peer counseling, and like, my whole life was about healing. So I was certainly not going to let people get away with stuff and then justify it. And that included me. So I was super motivated that was really where I started with, right? Was just trying not to act out distress on my kid and justify that.
But what's an example of hurting her? Because people would be like, what do you mean by hurting her?
Well, right. It could be anything. With Maggie, she was so sensitive.
That's a really funny answer. It could be literally anything.
It's a really good question. Like, she was so sensitive and so like responsive.
Yeah. Wow.
So that it was like, it could be forcing her to put mittens on when she didn't want to.
Yeah, like wearing a coat. Because I hated layers. I still do, actually, to be fair. I hated layers as a kid, and I know that that's a big thing with parents, is like, oh, my kid keeps taking their coat off, and it's like winter time, and I'm like, I was just like that forever.
So people would stop me on the street and say, your daughter's cold, how can you, what a bad mother, put her coat on? And I'd be like, yeah, you try. Because you couldn't, like, she literally, I have all these photos of her like in groups of other kids, and all the other kids are dressed up to the knot, like all covered in swathed in hats and scarves, and Maggie's literally just wearing snow pants and a t-shirt, and they're all playing outside, and she's like fine. So it's like now I know she had sensory issues. Now I know that we are now diagnosing with autism, right? And if I'd known that would have helped. It would have given me an anchor to understand. But when I say hurt, I don't mean like capital T trauma. I just mean her face would go blank. She would look scared and overwhelmed, and she'd withdraw. She'd shut down. Mm-hmm. I mean that she would.
I've been trying to think of examples, and like, one of the things I just remembered is like, clothing shopping. Like being taken clothing shopping by like extended family or like other parents, because I have 4, and just like I had terrible, well, not terrible boundaries, but like I had a lot of boundary issues as a kid in terms of like not wanting to disappoint people. And so I remember going shopping with family and like just being unable to say no to stuff, and them getting super weird and intense about clothing and being like, oh my god, you should totally get this, and being like, okay, and then they would get it for me and I would never wear it because I didn't actually want it, and then it just sort of perpetuating the weirdness, and then I'd be like, I don't like shopping at all. basically. Because it's like any time, basically, something happened and I didn't like it, that would be it. Like anytime after that, I would be like, we've lost the chance for this to be an enjoyable experience. We've hit a limit, and it doesn't matter what even happened. Like, my tolerance policy for a lot of things was so low, and then it got labeled as like, oh, anxiety, oh, sensitivity, like, you're such a sensitive little guy.
Or later it got labeled as moody, like you were being moody.
That's true.
Yeah, so people make up stories about kids, right? And that was another thing I noticed. They would make up stories about her. Like another one was like, oh, why won't, stepmom saying, I can't get her to eat vegetables. How are we going to, people would say like, how are we going to get her to be more this or get her to do that more? And I would not join with that. So I just never joined with trying to make Maggie do things unless they were really necessary. I had like a very low, it was very hard to make Maggie do anything she didn't want to do. She was incredibly sensitive and I wanted to be close to her, and I didn't want to like have her feel alone in the universe. So I very quickly, it became clear to me that I couldn't make her do anything without using coercion, without force, I would have to scare her. I would have to get angry. I would have to punish or manipulate or shame. Shame was a big one because that one is like a family thing. I felt like shame was probably the one I used the most, would be like covert shaming. And it took us, I think that's what I used when she was littler. And, it was really, our motivation was a big one, was how to get her to do things. Clean up. What would be clean up?
The like eternal question with this kind of thing.
Right.
Parenting. It's like, how do I get my kid to do stuff though?
Right. Like go to school. Like she wasn't having it. I couldn't make her stay in places without me, people she didn't want to be with, without having to, pry her fingers off of me. And to me, that felt like, oh, she's expressing hurt. Like if she was crying and saying, I don't want to, and really upset, I would listen to her. And so that was really one of the big differences. Other people were all for forcing her to do things she didn't want to do, like go to school, be without me. Because for her, it was like she needed access to me at all times, or she would, I don't know if I want to define it for you. From the outside, it looked like she was kind of losing her center. Like,
can I just interrupt you for 1 second? Please. I just want to add into what you're saying, Maggie, when you're talking about clothing shopping, you're referring to the coercive half of your family, aren't you?
Yes, this is true.
So you're talking about what it was like to shop with people who weren't listening to you. And so it sounds like you would give yourself up or people please. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. I would just disappear completely.
So Naomi, you're saying you were committed. You could see when that was happening. You actually could notice when that was happening, and you didn't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not like people were beating her, screaming at her. It's all soft stuff, but it still had an amazingly powerful impact on her, the coercion.
But what's interesting too about this is I think this language is coming into the context now of folks with highly sensitive kids or kids that go on later to realize like a lot of what I was doing, mom and dad, when I was young was masking.
Yeah.
I was masking. I wasn't being authentic. I was just doing, putting on a face so that I could get through the day. And it sounds like, Naomi, you were clued in to not wanting your kid to have to do that. It's amazing to me that you had that understanding at that time.
Right. Because the other thing I did was I stood in the way of it for her. I was passionate mama bear. And so I would take on everybody else. So I wouldn't join with it. And that's what got me into trouble. That's what Maggie said. It was all so weird. It's like those conversations. She's talking about people talking about, well, how your mom is, or, you know how Naomi is. It's like it was seen as being permissive, or it was judged. Even Rythea referred to it at the beginning. Rythea would take me aside and very gently ask me what the heck I was doing, being so permissive with my daughter. Like, didn't I think that children needed to know who the authority was? Didn't I think structure was a big one? You were like, she needs structure. And I'd be like, ugh.
I did to some degree, and I do.
But you didn't need to be structured. Well, this is a good one, actually, because you would say like, oh, she'd be interested in something. And then the other people would go, okay, so let's make all kinds of plans for you based on your interest.
Ugh.
And then that would quickly degenerate into them trying to coerce her. But you're
Exhausting.
so gifted at music and you're so good at, you have such potential. So it's all this covert control where they're trying to make her become something, right? They're worried about her developing her gifts. And it becomes this whole guilt trip of like, don't you want to be great? We're just trying to make you develop your gifts. But actually, they're controlling, they're expressing their anxiety about her. Really, it makes her feel like she's supposed to perform for them. And right, like you're supposed to be something to please them.
It made me very good at telling where, like, when someone has an agenda. Like, that is one of my biggest skills now, is like hearing somebody say something and going, what do you want from me? You want something from me. What's going on? Yeah.
That's amazing, Maggie. That's really, yeah, because I had the question of like, what, you have friends, what's it like to have been raised so differently? And how can you tell? How can you tell you were raised so differently?
We did have a couple of friends, so we unschooled.
Yeah.
So you did have a couple of friends, like
That's true.
Jude, and
but
they still weren't.
no, none of my friends, because like regardless of how, and I was thinking about this yesterday actually when you were talking about your parenting friends, because I'm like, as much as they understood like the whole like not, you know, joining with other people's thing about kids, they also weren't non-coercive at all.
Right.
I don't remember a lot of adults being, well, that's not true. I do remember a lot of other like parents trying to be coercive, but they couldn't really get in there very much because my mom was so like in the way of it. Like people would say stuff to me and then I would come home and like check with her. I'd like fact check it. Like, is this a thing that I need to be worried about or think about? And she'd go, no. But definitely in terms of my friends, like it's hard to say how much of it was non-coercion versus just like homeschooling, because I was also like homeschooled, unschooled, which was a big thing at the time. And so I remember a lot of my friends, whenever I would tell them that I was homeschooled, they'd get very jealous because they all had to go to school and they hated school because they were all little freaks like I was. You know, future diagnosed freaks, affectionate.
What about in terms of, I mean, here comes the thing about, do we talk about the other side of the family and the coercive side? I think we need to, you know.
People ask all the time. They ask me all the time, what's it like for your daughter to have two homes that are so different?
And they'll say like, you know, how do I navigate that? I'm trying to be non-coercive. Do you have any like advice for me, or how do you deal with it? And that's kind of a huge part of it, I think.
Yeah.
Maggie, I realize I didn't say how old you are, and it'd be helpful to know. How old are you?
Oh yeah, I'm 23.
You're 23. Okay, Maggie's 23. In case you're wondering.
Yeah, in case you're wondering, I'm a whole adult. I could say.
Yeah, so you had two homes that were very, very different.
I did. You guys split up when I was wee, and then I went to my dad's every weekend until I was 18.
And that was a lot of the focus of the coercion that caused the most.
Well, to throw them under the bus immediately a little bit. For sure coercive, and for sure like created problems for me.
Well, that they wanted you to sleep over younger than she was ready to sleep over. And that was a place that I just defended her choice. I didn't have an opinion. If she wanted to sleep over, that'd be great. I would love a break. But I didn't want her to be forced to sleep over because of the challenges that she had with sleep and regulation, which I didn't have language for at the time. I just was practicing attachment parenting and protecting her right to choice. And I could see that it had a huge cost on her. So every time she did something she didn't want to do, that she did out of people pleasing and masking, I saw the price she paid. So you would go over and she'd go to her dad's for the weekend, and then she'd have to have these massive sessions. It would take her days to recover. And then she would kind of just start to regulate and be in her zone. and then she would lose it again. And so I feel like I just, as a parent, it's worth it in the long run, because if I just kept focusing on the quality of my connection with her, I just kept focusing on the relationship I had with her, and that I wanted to be friends with her and allies and exploring together and learning together and getting to know who she was and sharing, and not being the boss of her and knowing what was best for her. That if I listened and we shared and we grew together, I just was more aligned with who I was. And in the end, is worth it. It's worth it to follow that, even if you're getting challenged. That's what I would say. It's worth it, because the more we process that, the more Maggie and I deconstructed what was happening.
I would say your relationship was the first friendship parent-child I'd ever seen.
Right.
Like, to see you guys hanging out, we'd all hang out, and then the two of you'd be sharing like friends, and you'd have feelings together. Like, you know, it was just so much like friend energy, not in a really like pleasurable, joyful way.
Mm-hmm.
It was so easeful to be around you. It wasn't that whole thing where you're watching parents work so hard to control and you feel so awkward. You're around, you're watching it, and you're like, ugh.
Right.
I remember,
like, I'm sorry, but this is just not okay. And then they yell at their kid, and they come back to you and they go, what were we talking about?
One of the things that I noticed really early on was the difference in like the way that I was with my mom, like out in the world. Because we get silly. Like, we will be in a grocery store, and like joking around, like to the point of like occasionally I've noticed like people looking at us because we're just going crazy in grocery stores, and like shopping in like the changing room. We'll just be wheezing with laughter because, and then like I'll go out, you know, for errands with a friend and her mom, and it's
right.
completely different just because of the way that their relationship is, or like was built, I guess. And it makes me sad. Like,
But it wasn't traumatizing for you or like hurtful to you to be in these situations of contrast. Like, you didn't have, when you were a kid, were you like, oh no, I wish I had parents that were telling me what to do? Like, that wasn't the source of the stress for you, that I was doing it differently.
No. But I definitely noticed it. But I don't think it was ever like, I don't think I ever, like, in terms of seeing the differences, I was never like, oh no, something is wrong with this and me, because I was too busy feeling like there was something else wrong with me. It was a whole other thing. But I don't know, maybe a little bit.
I think that's something a lot of us, like young adults and parents now, really reflect on how we're parenting. And now that's such a motivator for me to, like you were talking about Maggie when she was young. I mean, I have a kid just like that. That's my daughter. She's allergic to coercion. That's the joke. Or the not joke, you know, that's the truth. It's not about forcing her. If I could, well, I wouldn't, but you know, it would be easier. And so it's just all really touching, because I feel like I'm like watching like what maybe I might have, and just you guys picturing you two in the mall together is like, I can't even tell you it's truly like, it's really the only thing I want in this world. So it's just really touching to hear that. I wish every kid had that with their parent, to be able to just unmask completely. Like the fact that so many of us have to just put on an entire mask just to hang out with our folks.
Yeah.
And I just really hope that my kid never feels like that.
Yeah. So we would be in public, or we would be with extended family, and there'd be an interaction, and I would be tracking it. I would notice her face and notice her reaction. And other people would be like, well, she was fine with that. She didn't say anything. She didn't. True. And I'd be like, didn't you notice her face go blank? Didn't you notice her get like all stiff? Didn't you notice her disappearing? And that's like, you know, this amazing being here, my daughter, she doesn't speak up for herself in really extreme ways. She didn't have temper tantrums. She didn't have behavioral issues. She was the kid that all the other kids loved. And so her signals were subtle with other people. With me, they were loud, because what Cara just said, that's how I feel. That's how I felt. I would have loved to have known you back then.
God, right?
You know? And the truth is, my mother and I are also friends. My mother, like, I never had to defend this to my own mother. she didn't do it perfectly, but I had a friendship with my mother that also none of my other friends had with their mothers. I also had the mom that the other kids could come and hang out with and be themselves. And so, yeah, she didn't do it perfectly. And that's the other thing I would say is,
This just reminding me that like all of my friends love you as well.
right.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is you don't just get your one kid, you get all their friends like feeling safe around you, you know? Oh,
So allowing every single kid, if you actually look at them like they are an equal human being to you, then you're inviting them to be authentic because you're not judging them or molding them inherently inside of the relationship. It's like, it's amazing to just have all the kids over and genuinely enjoy who they are.
right.
I love that.
It makes such a big difference, like being an adult and treating kids like people. Because even if you have no idea about any of this and you're like completely detached from the situation, just like having one of my biggest like stressors as a kid was like extended family and like having, as you said, to like mask basically hardcore in front of them all, getting guilt tripped into like calling grandparents and stuff.
Saying thank you.
Yeah. Oh my God, saying thank you. Yeah.
Table manners.
Yeah.
Speaking of diversity, been losing my mind recently, in particular, realizing how much of like my behavior is like a learned, trained thing that I am doing consciously all the time.
You mean masking?
Yeah. And like, yeah, learning so many things about like my childhood that I didn't really know until we started talking about this more. And one of the things, autism in particular, as of recently, and one of the things that was making me, and is still actively making me lose my mind, is that I didn't know how to say, like, I didn't know how to smile and say thank you for a really long time. Like, she had to prompt me for years to do that in, like, birthday party situations, social situations like that. I would just be like,
she was very polite. She was a lovely person. I only did it because I could see the social moment and the other people. I did it to kind of protect her. I got out in front of it. And it was just like a little nudge, not like shame.
Because I would offend people.
Right.
I would just kind of, they would give me things and I would just kind of hold the object and stare at them.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say that I didn't appreciate it.
Kids can extend gratitude in many ways that are not just thank you so much.
Yeah.
They can play with the toy. They can wear the thing. Like,
so weird. Like pay attention, notice, like get them on the floor and play with them with the toy and be like, and why does it have to be this like, thank you, Grandma?
I'm having so many thoughts. I can't decide which one to grab onto, but I can say that Tori, my almost 12-year-old, has this best friend. And for a while, when her and her best friend would come over, they would just start ordering me around and yelling at me. They'd be like, we want grapes. Wow. And I would be like, you guys, why are you talking to me so intensely? And her friend said, I'm not allowed to do this at home.
oh, yeah.
I like ordering you around and yelling. And also they would be like, fuck. Like they would just be like really going for the course. And then when I realized that her friend really wanted to have some power, we made a real game of it. I was like, okay, let's really go for it. You guys order me around. I'll just do everything you say. And we like really went for it so that it was conscious.
And playful parenting is really big. It's really, really big.
We talk about non-coercive, like not forcing, but what are we doing? What are we doing? And playing is like, it's still like that with my kid. She's so funny, like Maggie is too.
It sounds like, it just totally sounds like it's like that right inside this conversation and like in the mall with you guys. You're still playing.
No, like I one of my favorite examples that I always think of in terms of like how you parented me is like one of the biggest challenges for parents is like, how do I get my kid to do stuff? Getting out of the house in general was a big struggle for us just because of how we both are as people.
Speaking about
divergence, but like I remember very vividly being, I don't know, 3 one of the big, no, even younger than that, maybe 2 or 3, I don't remember. But like do you remember the white rabbit?
Yes.
We must follow the white rabbit to get me out the door, because it was the only thing that could motivate me. It was like, oh my God, it's a game. It's a game.
Yeah.
It's a story. What are we doing? We're on an adventure. I was like, hell yeah, sign me up.
Was the white rabbit just an idea, or was there like a
She was
puppet?
playing Alice in Wonderland. She'd been watching Alice in Wonderland. She was in and out. She didn't want to leave the house to go get groceries because she was busy researching story.
Yeah.
Maggie, story is everything. And so just an inspired moment, I just said, oh no, where's the white rabbit? He went that way. We have to follow the rabbit. Like within seconds, she was out that door. I had to chase her out the door, you know, and then the whole grocery trip was we were just Alice in Wonderland looking for the white rabbit. It was effortless. Of course, there were so many difficult parenting moments that I guess what I would say is that's not what matters the most. Like you don't have to do it perfectly. And I didn't have a community and I didn't have a paradigm. I stumbled across this or that. I found playful parenting. I had my somatic practices, and it still worked out because I just kept going for the love and the connection. Yeah. And your kids will forgive you so much that you don't remember or care about all the ways I didn't do it perfectly.
And to be clear, as much as I'm, you know, praising you, and I will continue to do so. Definitely didn't do it perfectly.
Well, Maggie, at the beginning, I think you made a comment that was like, my perception of it was a little different, or it was in your kid brain, right? When there was coercion, like you were saying, like, do you remember that, or what was your impression of that? Like, did you grow up being like, oh, my relationship with my mom is so peaceful and la-ti-da, and like I just am always at ease?
Yeah, no, definitely not. Like, it was definitely, you know, better. It was the best like option I had for a very long time in terms of like my perception of my parents being like, oh, I had a preference very early. But no, we had issues all the time.
No, we worked them out.
Yes, but like
we're still working them out.
Like, yeah, we had, because we struggled for sure with
cleaning.
Like cleaning. Oh God, cleaning. I was an extremely unhelpful child. You know, she has flaws. I also have flaws. I was a terrible child. I was unhelpful. I did not. Some kids are like, "Ooh, let me come and help you with this little task." You set them up with a little task and they'll do it. She would set me up with tasks and I would find objects to play with.
Well, like if you set up painting, she wouldn't paint on the paper. She'd paint all over herself.
Yes.
She'd play with the water. It would just, you know, if she was like, let me help you water the garden, the plants would not get watered.
No, I would play with the hose.
She'd play with the hose. I have all these photos of her, like I was gardening. Actually, I found one the other day. I should share it with you guys. I was gardening and I was trying to get the like little edge trimmer thing in with plastic tubing thing. And I turned around and she had stepped inside of it, wrapped it around herself, and was kind of like, she was a princess. She was a character. It was a whole thing. And she was like 8. She didn't like doing things. She liked playing and story. Mm-hmm. And so to make her focus on like chores and stuff was an agony. Yes. And so that's where I would lose it because I would shame her.
You tried very hard. Yes, and you did. But you tried very hard to like find ways around it. And the problem is that there was very few, like there was no right way to do it. And so you something and it would make me upset because of the nature of cleaning and how it sucks. Then I would get upset and then you would be like pretty instantly go, okay, I'm going to stop doing this and we're going to figure this out. And we eventually would repair the moment and, you know, do the task and then move on. Like it was definitely years and years of like the same conflict, the same couple conflicts of like basic executive function tasks and
self-care. All like, just to add this in, that it revealed also my distress about cleaning, my places where I felt overwhelmed, places where I was struggling, that I was pulling on my daughter. Mm-hmm. I wanted her to rescue me. I wanted her to participate. I wanted her to, and I also was trying to make her be a good person. You know, it was all the places where I was trying to impart values and like family values and like cultural values. And in that, all my distress would flow in. And that's where I had my worst parenting moments, actually. And the more I like just did counseling and I got to a point where I just said, before I act out all over my kid, I'm going to go get a session. And, you know, Rythea was one of the people I would call, and I would just be like losing my mind with stress or frustration or loneliness, and most of the time, like 99% of what was hard about parenting was actually my stuff. Mm-hmm. And yes, it's hard to have a divergent child without knowing it. It also isn't, because it's an incredible opportunity to not be like mean and hurtful and justify that as cultural values, right? Like
you're using the word divergent. So now that's a frame that you're both using. You've discovered you're both divergent. Mm-hmm. Your whole family is divergent. Almost everyone in it is divergent, right? This is what you're waking up to. I think so. This is a new frame for me. Although I can look back and see that at any point I could have gotten my child evaluated, and there would have been many, I think, diagnoses, but that was not possible. She was not going to be taking those tests. That was not possible for us. And now I'm glad we didn't, because many of those things resolved. And then also we've learned how to work with them through like love and not seeing it as a problem. But, you know, I'm still learning about that. But I feel like maybe there's people who don't have that frame. I would love to hear anything about what that means for you to say you're divergent, to feel that. I feel like there's like, I don't know if pride is the right word, but there's just like it feels good to have that frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's complicated for a lot of people because of the way that, you know, society as a whole, like the wider Western world, like views like any difference at all in their sort of established norm. But for me, it's been a very positive, well, it's been a very complicated series of realizations, but a very positive one ultimately, because it's like I went from feeling like, oh, there's something inherently wrong with me. Like since I was about 12, 13, like about when puberty hit, I was like, oh, this is bad. Oh, there's something wrong with me, based off of the way that parents treated me, based on the way that other kids existed around, like how I felt around other kids. Things that were hard for me that other people made seem very easy and normal and effortless. And I'm like, I'm putting in a lot of effort here, guys. Mm-hmm. Is that not normal? And them going, oh no, that's totally normal. Here's how I deal with it. And it's like the worst advice you've ever heard. And like, there's a lot of conversation to be had about the like problems that can arise from like getting diagnosed because of all the stigma around it and pathologizing. But for me, it is sort of not prideful, but yeah, you know,
empowering. How about empowering?
Yes, because validating, because it's like, oh my God, what do you mean there's something going on? And I'm not just insane and weird.
Yeah, like, yeah.
And sure. That once we understand, now that we're kind of getting a broader understanding, for me, it's been like, oh, I can choose to stop masking as much. I can identify, and I'm never going to be somebody who isn't stressed by certain kinds of stimulus. I'm never going to be someone who isn't really sensory sensitive. And that's okay. In fact, it's beautiful.
And it means that you can, like, once you understand it better, it means that you can figure out strategies in order to function better. Because instead of, like, just kind of running directly at the task or the problem and being like, why isn't this working? I keep running into this brick wall and I'm still not getting through the brick wall yet. It's like, oh, I can build a door through the brick wall instead of just repeatedly running into the wall.
Yeah, like we can't do things. Maggie and I don't really do things the same way as other people. We never have. And so now we're like, oh, that's just who we are. Like I understood her masking because I instinctively knew what it was like to mask. And I didn't want her to have to do that with me. And we both find certain things really tasking.
Which I think probably made the diagnosis journey a lot longer just because of like the way that you were also a little freak.
Yeah.
So it's like so many moments looking back where it's like, that probably would have gotten noticed earlier if you weren't also doing the exact same thing.
Right.
Like, it's like,
on the other hand, I'm thinking about children who are neurodiverse or highly sensitive, and then they have to deal with battling their parents on top of that.
For sure.
On top of it. So you're saying you might have found out a little earlier, but the truth is it can take people a lifetime because they have to take all the family baggage can take your whole life with that before you can get to the point where you realize, oh, I have differences that I need to attend to. I need a different strategy than my doctor says and my therapist says, or whatever.
My parent, my friend.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, like, unknowingly end up with those strategies where it's like, this is what worked for me, and then they try to impart that wisdom onto their kids.
Which is kind of coercion. It's soft coercion, right?
Yeah, it ends up being coercion a lot of the time.
Which is like, be like me instead of who are you and what's going to work for you.
Yeah. I see a lot of that with my young adult clients. Most of them have diagnoses or are self-diagnosed with like things like ADHD and ASD. And that's their experience, is not necessarily that they had also like a relatable parent or caregiver, but that they had the opposite, and they always internalized, oh yeah, fix me, I'm the problem. Like I have folks in my practice who are in their early 20s who have been in ADHD coaching for like 10 years with the same issues they had 10 years ago. None of it's been fixed or changed or moved in a direction that is working for them because they haven't had the person who, has been able to see outside of that behaviorist lens where it's all the top down, like train, fix, coach.
Yeah.
Oh
God.
Right.
Yeah. I'm really not aligned with that pathologizing.
Yeah.
I really believe in neurodiversity. I actually think that normal is white supremacy in our culture, and it's authoritarian, and it's patriarchy, and it's actually what is normalized in our culture is abuse dynamics, justified as cultural, as all sorts of things. And I'm not for any of that. So I don't think of diversity I diverge from that norm.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud to diverge from that norm.
Absolutely.
And so divergence
is
not I'm pathologized or you're pathologized, Maggie. It's that it's okay to have different ways of doing things. In fact, I celebrate it. I love diversity.
Like, look at the way that women have been pathologized as a gender. Exactly. And then we have female folks who are autistic, right? And they're then pathologized in a completely different way.
If you aren't a 12-year-old boy obsessed with trains, then you can't be autistic. If you're not a 6-year-old boy who can't sit still, then you can't have ADHD.
And back to like if you just want to be friends with your kids, then someday you'll end up like I was last night, stressing about this interview, and Maggie saying, "Oh, honey, and I think you're doing an autistic thing right now. Actually, I think you're trying to answer the question correctly. And there is no correct answer. And also you're trying to make sure you say all the right things and get it right. And you can't. And so you could just relax and be yourself.
Yeah. Because it's a genuine question, which is, something that I've struggled with before, is being asked questions and being, okay, what's the most optimal answer that I could give? And it's like, the actual question is literally just, how do you feel about this? What do you think about this? Genuine curiosity versus like I need you to give me the answer.
Right? But the other piece is like, in being friends, it's not just me. I don't have to have all the answers for her. I don't have to get this right. I don't have to be the authority in order to keep her safe, except in very small circumstances. I don't have to like show her who's boss for her to feel secure. I don't have to like hide my true self from her. I don't have to make her be how I think she should be to succeed in life. I don't know how she's going to succeed in life. I still don't.
Neither do I.
But if I'm her friend, then she's also my friend, which is incredible because she's funny and wise and honest and incredibly helpful. She's not helpful in getting things done around the house,
No,
but she's
I'm
helpful
still not.
in other ways that I cherish so deeply. So being friends comes back to you in this incredible way.
Tori said to me recently, she was like, Mom, I just find you so annoying lately. You're so annoying to me. And I was like, sweetheart, we're separating. You're growing up, and this is natural for you to find me annoying so that you can feel yourself separate from me. And we like cried and hugged each other. And like, can you imagine? Like, most kids, if they call their parents annoying, they just get shunned, and
Their parent would say, "You're annoying.
yeah,
You're annoying me. You know,
How
all the
dare
things
you?"
you do, and you
Right, how
don't
dare
forget your
you?
stuff, and how dare you say that to me? And you're annoying me right now, and it goes all back onto the kid again. Oh God, that's why our
And
kids.
also, do you have any
That's
idea what I do for you? Then there's all like,
Yeah.
do you have any idea? How dare you call me annoying when you know what I do? I work all day and blah blah.
Yeah,
And then
you're
I
so
put food on the table. And then,
ungrateful.
Yeah, great. Oh, for
And
sure.
what are those? Those are all victimizer voices.
Absolutely.
We internalize that as internalized oppression, and then we spend billions of dollars on therapy trying to
Right?
get those victimizer voices out while still trying to stay close to our family because we're lost without them, because we love them, or we're scared of losing their love. It's this idea of like how we pathologize children, how we pathologize things, because like PDA, pathological demand avoidance, right? So
Absolutely.
kids get labeled with this, or like oppositional defiant disorder, or these things which are like, you don't like being told what to do, A, and B, I like to redefine it as perfectly reasonable demand avoidance or authentic demand avoidance, because it's like being told, being oppressed feels bad.
Yes. And some people are just by nature more sensitive to that, and those people should rule the world.
Yeah.
Those are the people that
Yeah.
we should be listening to, because they are come out the womb and they're like, this is weird.
See, I've started using the word neuroqueer
Yeah.
because I like it better, actually, because it's like I'm not like it sort of is like I get to be different, and it's a good thing. It's like the way we reclaim the word queer, which not, my generation is more resonant with than Maggie's, I think.
It depends who you talk to.
Right.
That is a hot topic issue.
Yeah. Reclaiming something for ourselves and being like, it's okay, like fly your freak flag high, be like, yes, I want to be different. I want to challenge authority. I want my daughter. Why would I want to raise my girl to do what she's told? Isn't that the most dangerous thing you can think of to do to a girl child? Like, to be obedient is
To anyone.
Mhm.
Regardless, though. Like,
Yeah,
every gender, every identity is so vulnerable to the world.
Mhm.
I was thinking in the beginning, Naomi was saying, Maggie didn't want to sleep at her dad's, and I didn't want to force her. But most people, there's no choice about that with the law. Like, they just have to. And I didn't want to force her to go to school, and most people can't do that. Just, privilege, like the whole issue of privilege. And also, like, most people are like, well, school's not an option for us. Everyone says that to me.
yeah.
Everyone on TikTok, everyone on all the socials. They're
Yeah.
like, school's not an option. So
there's a really big difference between saying to a kid, I know this sucks. I agree with you. Maggie would say, she'd come home and go, Mom, is that a real thing? And I'd be like, no, here's what I think. Like, I would support her, and I was always on her side. If I had to put her in school, I could have done that authentically by acknowledging this is arbitrary. This is all made up. This is mostly make work. Like, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about, like, don't join with the big story that says you have to go to school because if you don't, you'll be a failure. Like, actually acknowledge that you don't have another choice. If you actually have to put your kid in school, of course, but there's a difference between saying you need to do this because I don't have any other options and we're still in it together and I've got your back in this to the best of my ability, and saying, well, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
Everybody has to do this.
You need
Or
to
like-
do this because I said so.
We all have to do things we don't want to do sometimes.
Yeah. No, literally, no, I really like that you said that, because I had someone say, like, literally pretty much that exact thing, except that they basically said, like, life is about doing things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And I remember being so upset afterwards, because I'm like, that sucks.
Yeah. That's
Why would you say
depressing.
that? Exactly. I'm like, well, then what's the point?
Right.
Like, what's the point of being alive on this earth if it's all about doing stuff you don't
yes.
want to do? And it kind of like wrecked my relationship with them for a long while because I'm like, I don't like this dynamic we've got going. Like, ultimately, all it was a like catch-all like phrase in order to get me to do something because it was a family member's it was a grandparent's birthday or whatever, and they were trying to get me to come down for the holiday. And also, I was having a rough time, like right then as well. I was having gallstone attacks. And so it was just kind of like the final like nail in the coffin of that interaction where I was just like, this sucks. Like, I'm going through some shit and you're gonna tell me that life is about doing stuff I don't want to do. Like, it was very dismissive.
So invalidating.
It's like, suck it up. It's just like, suck it up.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, because like I think ultimately what was happening is like she didn't want to go either. She didn't want to go either, and she was like, if I have to go, then you have to go. Like, that's what that dynamic was. Is it's like, how come you get to say no and I don't?
What I heard you say, I didn't want to make her sleep at her dad's, and I didn't want to make her go to school. Most people would be like, that's not right. You can't do that. We all have to do those things. Fuck you.
Yes, and you know, a lot of the time it is because like you as the parent didn't get to say no to these things.
And so you definitely felt like, I mean, she did go to school at one point.
I went to a number of like alternative schools. We tried kindergarten, hated it. We tried, you know, alternative schools. And we tried a public school that I went to almost entirely because I had a crush on a girl that was going to the school.
And because we had neighbors who came from another country, and for them, they were just horrified that a little girl would not go to school when in their cultural history, they fought so hard for girls to be educated. And I really wanted this to come in today, that I just feel like the cultural diversity is also really, I really value it and I honor it. And so I remember Maggie like taking in those experiences and being like, because those little girls were like, don't you want to be educated? Like, how can you not want to be educated? They would terrify them. And it was part of Maggie's motivation at the time. And I was like, okay, you want to try, go for it. You want to go to school? Try school, right? It didn't work for her. And it's important, I think, to be respectful and to just allow diversity. Like I just kept, the way I stayed with it was I just kept saying, I get to do it differently. I get to try this my own way and make my own authentic mistakes. And you know,
I think that people also, like, if you're talking to a regular person who's interviewing you two, they'd be like, well, how did it come out? Like, what are you doing, Maggie? What's your resume?
I'll admit that I've kind of been waiting for that question because that's what people always ask. I had at a dinner party, I mentioned that I was homeschooled because it comes up a lot, because that's every adult's only talking point is like, oh, how's school going? How are you doing? What's your plan for the future? It's like they only have so much they can talk about with kids.
Maggie, I love you. That's so true.
So true.
Everywhere we go, people say to my daughter, what grade are you in? That's what
exactly. What grade are you in?
And she'll say, I don't know.
That's a great answer. I wish that I'd said that. And I kind of did, because I didn't know what grades were. Like, I didn't know any of the like ages that correlated with grades for a really long time. I still don't really. And then they asked me if I could read. That was their follow-up question, was, can you read?
Yeah. But they also started talking to her like maybe she was really, can you speak English? Like, at that time you were taking like as many books out of the library as humanly possible.
Exactly. It's like I started reading extremely early, in fact.
I wonder if it's because maybe you were curious about learning naturally.
And I wanted to mention that actually is like, in terms of school, the reason school didn't work out for me wasn't because I didn't like learning. Like, I loved learning, and I loved learning so much even as a child that like I was weird about it. For a little while, I had this phase.
The general consensus, like from the general population, people who weren't homeschooled, they'll say like all the homeschooled kids I know were freaks and they were all like weirdos and hippies and all this disparaging language around who they are now and what they were like then and all this stuff. And I know what I know for sure after all of the work that I've done with kids and my experience, kids are hardwired to learn regardless of how their brain works. Like they will go out hungry for knowledge and exploration, however that looks. It might not look like sitting in a classroom, but they're learning, they're desperate. Like that's a fact.
Yeah, the problem arises when, like you can't learn in that, or like it's harder for you to learn in that school environment as it was for me. Being forced to focus on subjects that like I had no interest in, like geography. Right. It's like everyone needs to know math. You have to learn math. Everyone's so intense and weird about math because it's so important in life or whatever. And I didn't like it. I'm good at it. I'm very good at math and like math related stuff. Coding, I love coding. Hate math. Never wanted to do it. I think I stopped at grade like 4. We had like workbooks for math, homeschooling, and I stopped at grade 4 because I hated it. We couldn't make me do it. I was considering higher education, as one does at my age, and because I was homeschooled, I have to go through, alternative routes, and one of those things is like passing equivalency tests. But in order to pass the equivalency test, I would need to know math for certain courses. And so I took a math course because I'm like, if I'm going to go, I was considering going into game design. And in order to go into game design, I would need high school math, basically. And so I took a math course and it basically sped me through grades of math that I would need up to grade 12. And I passed the course and I got like straight A's basically.
See, for people who don't know what unschooling is, it's self-directed learning. So it's children, like they gravitate towards things, they absorb things like sponges, and the parent supports them and gives them whatever they need to go into that, and they are allowed to dive into things full and spend all their time on it if they want. Some kids will just like make slime for fucking months and then that's over. And that's their science, that's their science lesson. But the other thing is that when a person decides they're interested in something for a reason and they are motivated on their own to learn it, it's like what you're saying. In 1 year, you're just like do, and you're good. You find out you're good at it, and you're learning it for an actual reason.
Exactly. It improves the motivation so much because it's like, okay, I want to get to there. And that's one of the things that made me so mad about math specifically is that everyone was so intense and weird about math as a concept that I had to learn. And I was like, why though?
That's me. That's so me. I never understood math. I never understood the point. I was in grade 4 doing long division and I was coming home and in my head, my little grade 4 head, I was going, what the hell? Why are we doing this? Well, but you were just saying how you learned grade 3 to up into university. And I was just thinking in my head, I went to school. Okay. All those years I went to high school, went to elementary school, junior high, went to university. I still don't know any of that math. Just so everybody's clear, here's someone who did not go to school and didn't learn the math in the way that schools teach it. Here's someone who did go to school, didn't learn the math in the way that schools teach it.
Exactly. Like, thank you for reminding me, because one of the points I wanted to make is that I did that whole course and I gave it a fair shot and I was good at it. Straight A's that I didn't study for and didn't deserve because I would do all of my studying literally the night before and then I would take the test. But at the end of it, I still don't like it, basically. And one of the things that used to bother me in particular, and the reason I bring this up, is because my dad was, much like the geography, he would be like, math is important, you need to learn math, and would be like, one day you'll need it. He would like do all this stuff to like be like, here, look how explaining stuff to me, as if that would then make me go, oh, And so I was like, okay, I'll do the math course because I need it for another thing. I will give it a shot. And I did the math course and I hated it so much that I'm not going into game design because I'm like, if I go into game design, I'm going to have to do even more math. And that makes me feel ill.
I'm just curious, like, what are you up to, Maggie, in your life?
I pivoted very hard into like more like admin. It turns out that I really like administrative tasks. I love spreadsheets, I love forms, I love documents, I love tables. I love organizing information and like logging stuff. And I've been doing that for fun forever. And so I realized, hold on, is this a thing that I could do and get paid for? Could I get paid to make really pretty documents? Turns out yes. So probably pivoting in that direction. But other than that, the stuff that I enjoy doing is like, I love coding. I love web design. I got really into web design and stuff. Coding.
I just want to put in a little thing. I lead parent support groups for parents who want to transition from authoritarian parenting to non-coercive collaborative conscious parenting. And Maggie is my tech assistant in my groups right now. And even though she's great at tasks and holding the Zoom space and just managing all the details, I actually find your emotional awareness, the depth of your presence, it's really profound. So it's, yes, you love all those tasks, but it's really you that makes that all work for me.
For most of our evolution, anthropologists coming out here, right? For most of our evolution, we apprentice, we pay attention to the kid and we say, what is their nature? Who might I apprentice them to? And then they're living and making and working all at the same time. And yes, there was a kind of authoritarianism in that, in the master apprentice model, you know, depending on the culture and depending on where, but this idea that we gotta like do this like general study and be like everybody else. I mean, there's opportunity in generalized education, but there's also a shadow in it that I just think we're evolving right now, and we're at a difficult place in our evolution.
Well, it's capitalism.
As humans, yes, capitalism ruins everything.
Right. Well, and capitalism is failing hard right now.
It's failing hard. So the original
Thank
sort
God.
of public education was actually lifting people up and giving them access. I'm not anti-school or anti-education. I'm anti-authoritarian oppression. I'm anti, you know, I read John Taylor Gatto and Paulo Freire, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Like, there's some really weighty, interesting thinkers that you can read that really help to give some perspective to like why we might want to raise our children differently, not to obey rules, not to go to public school just because everybody else is doing it. Like, if you have to, okay, you have to. And I'm not telling anyone what to do, but I just don't think that those things that we think are so important are as important to the making of a full human being.
Well, that's what I want to know what you're into, Maggie, but I also feel like the success, quote unquote success, is just in relationships, being able to be close to people, being able to take in love and give love, being able to, to figure out what
being
you
able
want.
to articulate your opinions like you have so well for the last hour.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
what, how do we measure success? So I feel like in the non-coercive collaborative conscious parenting philosophy, it's relationship first, believing that that's actually matters more than getting things done, keeping things clean, being on time, being polite, being well behaved, following orders, getting good grades, that it's actually more important.
It's more important. And it absolutely has worked out.
Yeah.
That has panned out. Now, do I still wake up in the middle of the night and worry about my daughter? 100%, no matter what. I had a friend who was parenting completely different than me, and I was talking to her about this, and she said, I'm doing it opposite to you, and I still wake up worrying about my kid. Like, no matter how you do it, I look at the world and I say, I don't know how anybody can be looking at the world as it is right now and feel confident about what their kids should do to survive or be well in this world. I think it's a challenging time in history. And I think we need divergent thinkers. We need creative, strong people who are going to do it differently. I think we need a kind of revolution, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, do I wake up in the middle of the night and worry about how she's going to make a living? And yeah, of course I do. Of course I do. But I also, I know adults that I'm worrying about how they're going to make a living, like who've been to school,
I was gonna say,
who
like,
got all the education. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't struggle.
yeah, and also, like, I don't know, the measure of success has always been a big thing for me as the child in this dynamic, because it used to make me very nervous.
Yeah.
In terms of, not in terms of like, oh, I'm so worried about my future. It was mostly like, I'm so worried about what people will think of me. Like, think of me and also think of the things that we're doing and judge them based off of me as like a measure of success, right? And justify myself for doing things certain ways.
Your stress about your success is about what other people would think of you. That you have that. Which,
well,
how could you not? How could you not? With this
exactly.
the level of pressure on young people. Oh my God.
Yeah, I find it so annoying that like the only thing that most adults will like talk about with children is like success, basically. Are you hitting your milestones according to plan? Like, have you?
It's really interesting. You know, you'll ask somebody, like, I was just thinking about a comment someone made recently about their grandson. Oh, he's into hockey these days and he's doing really well with it. What about he loves it?
Yeah,
It's gotta be like he scored 5 goals, or he's at this position now, and it's like always about the performance. Like it's really implicit, and it's really just sort of like low key, like a little comment like that implies definitely that everybody's tracking all the time. Like where are you in the ranks?
You know, the interests, the actual like genuine interests of the kid just kind of disappear and all that, because it's like, well, if they're not, you know, related to performing, then what's the point?
Right.
I was extremely, and still am, very performance resistant. Some kids are very performance forward. They're like, oh, this is working for me, actually. You know, like, I can make this work for me, rather. And I was just like, this sucks and I hate it and I'm not doing it. And you can't make me, actually. And I remember
that was hard for me at first.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted her to perform to justify what I was doing and make it look like it was all worth it.
Yeah.
I have that with my kid. We're talking a lot about relationship and then the system, and then how do you relax and thrive in relationship with a system that has so much expectation and pressure and survival needs that you have to consider all the time. And the way we're living is so unnatural and so dysfunctional and so stressful and so out of alignment. We're trying to find how to be balanced when everything is so out of alignment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so I feel like the thing that makes my heart soften is when I think about being close with my daughter. That's the only thing that makes me feel good when we're talking about this. It's like, we are close. I am really close with my daughter. She comes home she just went with her dad to a party all day Saturday and Sunday. She comes home, she just has to unload the whole thing on me. And then this happened and that bad. I didn't like this. And I did it. And then she just tells me everything. And my whole body relaxes because she's telling me what's going on. I'm just hoping she can always do that. I'm so scared that someday she won't tell me anymore. But so for right now, she needs that.
Especially it just reminding me of like this thing of like that I hear a lot of parents say of like, my kid won't talk to me. You know, my kid won't talk to me. My kid doesn't tell me anything. Like, I tell my mom everything, have my entire life. For sure, like, my dad still currently to this day will like make little remarks to my mom about like, oh, you know, she doesn't tell us anything. I think the thing that drives me crazy about it is like how little parents fully are blaming it on the kid.
Yeah.
Like, there is absolutely no self-reflection happening.
Yes.
That whole paradigm where it's just like, my child won't talk to me about stuff. surely this has nothing to do with my
Do you know what
actual.
they'll do, Maggie, is they will call me, I'm a child therapist, and tell me
Yes.
to fix their child and make them
Yes.
talk to them.
Also, it's like, or they just say kids today. And what are you
Yeah.
going to do?
One of my principles was not to get oppositional, not to be on the other side, but to be on the same side. And that's how I'm as a therapist as well, is like I literally will move the chair and sit beside someone to make the point of like,
Mhm.
we are on the same side of whatever this issue is. Like, I just didn't want to be opposite, you know?
Well, I do that, Tori's really into shopping. Now, I've never liked shopping. We go to the mall regularly. I never ever thought, and if I was just like, you know what? I don't like the mall. Go with your friends. But I'm like, I'm going to figure out how to like the fucking mall. And I do like it now. We have a great time. We bond so hard when we go shopping.
That's
And
so sweet.
That's
yeah,
really
that's because I've learned I gotta get in there and see why is she interested in it? What kind of, she loves perfume. I generally hate perfume, but she's really taught me to get into smells. I'm really getting into it. The other day she's like, Mom, do you like perfume now? I said, I think I do. And she just got so excited. Her whole face lit up. I said, I think I'm really into it now.
No, it goes such a long way just to like show interest in the things your kids are talking about and like the things that they like, and to like not only show interest but like make an effort see what's going on over there.
Yeah,
like
it's also how you're going to protect them, because they can come to you and know that it's safe. That we had stuff happen where where it was tricky territory, and she felt safe enough to come to me with really hard stuff. And we had a code where she could say, Mommy, don't be upset. I just need you to hear me.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I'm completely just gonna love you no matter what you say. I'm gonna just listen, and if I have feelings about it, I'll take them somewhere else. Like, I think that boundary is really essential. It's like sometimes we need to take our feelings away from the kid. It's not the same as being emotionally present, right? Like, reacting emotionally is not the same as being emotionally present or emotionally available.
It's such an important distinction.
I always say that there's like probably most of the things I was going to say, I don't say. And I'm so glad I didn't say that. Like, a lot of times I'm thinking I'm about to say, I'm like, bite my tongue. And then we go on. I'm like, thank God I didn't say that thing I was about to say all the time. My first impulse to say things is usually not quite right. Yeah. Distress. Right. It's distress.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Tori spent the day at a party, and when she came home, she said something like, I thought all the men were creepy. And she said, that's probably just me, but that's how I felt. And I was like, okay, just be quiet. Just listen. Don't say anything. And I just listened. I said, oh yeah, that tell me more. There's so many places I could have gone with that. Okay. She's hitting puberty. So, and she's interfacing with the world now for the first time. Like, what is male energy like that she has to start to interface with? And I was like, okay, I get this is very important that I don't say anything stupid, or she might never tell me about it.
Yes.
Shut the fuck up. Don't say yes or no.
It's reminding me of actually a much younger experience where I was confronted by this with Maggie, where she was probably 4, and we were at a friend's house, and it was Christmas time, and her friend had been given a Barbie for Christmas, and like her first Barbie doll. And this little girl was so into that kind of feminine stuff, and her mother had taken it immediately out of her hand and put it away, and she'd never seen the Barbie again, because her mother's values were feminist, and she wanted so much for her daughter to be free from all of that stuff, but the effect on her child was devastating. And I remember that example, and seeing that and thinking, even if I think I'm imparting something important, and for me, Maggie was really into all the TV movies, all the movies.
Oh, princesses.
Lots of, and she was watching like a Sleeping Beauty, one of the Disney ones. And at the beginning, there were these silly little fairy dances. And the whole time she was watching it, I was in the background, sotto voce, basically being like criticizing it, like, oh, that's so stupid. Oh my! I was like releasing all my distress about coercive femininity and like blah blah blah, right? And Maggie at 2.5 was like, Mama, put that on again and you go away and you don't talk.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, I've been shaming her genuine interests.
Mhm.
Around the time I started asking her, as a consequence of that realization, like, what do you see here? What do you love about this movie? And I was concerned about like, oh, you're learning about marriage and all girls have to be married and the male gaze and all this feminist analysis, which I think is valid. But for a 2.5-year-old, maybe pay attention to what they're genuinely loving. And I said, what do you think marriage is? And she said, oh, marriage is and then you dance. Right. And I started to ask her like what she was what do you love about these little fairies? What are you noticing? And then having conversations at her level about it, rather than trying to form and shape her. And that it's like, put that analysis aside and really be present. And then this whole dialogue and relationship opens up.
Do you have any words of wisdom when stuff is really hard? You know, you were talking about playing in the context of getting her out the house, like when she's a young child. And obviously that's my experience right now. It's like, how do I play when I'm literally spent? Like one brain cell really just ticking along. And I'm like, can you give me some words of hang in there? Or, you know, like you said, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Like, do you guys have any like just words of wisdom?
I would say, yeah, because exactly that sentiment of like, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm remembering many instances where she was like fully passing out on a couch.
Yeah.
I was just like toddling around the room, doing my little thing. I was basically just playing around her and was really into, for a while, I was really into like pretending to make like ice cream of like, what would your like ideal ice cream sundae be, and like make her like come up with this elaborate thing because I really liked the like thought process of it. And she would just be like fully on the couch just like, yes, I would like
Yum yum yum.
yum yum yum.
Yum yum yum. Give me the special.
Yeah. Acknowledging your kids' stuff, and also like telling them stuff as they get older. Like you don't have to be a like older kid or a teenager in order to start having conversations about stuff.
Right, like you can say to your kid, Mommy has 2 brain cells left today.
Mommy's tired.
So I'm gonna lay on the couch and say yum yum, and you tell me all about the ice cream toys or whatever.
Exactly.
You know, you can totally do that. That's so true.
And you're allowed to be authentic with them.
Yes,
I used to play games with Maggie. Well, at one point I told Maggie, this is Monster Mommy. Monster Mommy does not behave well, and I don't want to be Monster Mommy. And Monster Mommy was just whatever it was. Like I would getting in and out of the car, I would lose it. There were certain moments where, you know, out in the world where I would lose it. We were saying like brain cells gone, everybody's hungry. I'm the one that's got to drive the car and get us home and get lunch and do all the things, and I'm not feeling it right now. I got no creativity left to play. Yeah. And I would say to her, if you see Monster Mommy, it's not your job to fix it, but you could just say, you know, take a deep breath, Mommy. And that was our code. And then I would like fake breathe in a funny way that would make her laugh. It's like to have the conversation about that. You
let them in. Let them in your own feelings and your own processing. And, you know, you can absolutely say to your kid who's like 2, 3, I had a really hard day. I'm tired.
Yes. You know? Especially because like something that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about is that they're going to know anyways.
Right.
Like kids are really smart and are really perceptive, and they're going to notice that something is up regardless of what you tell them, regardless of what you like intentionally show them. They're going to know that something is wrong, and they're going to feel weird about it, and they're going to pull on you in order to be like, what's wrong?
Right. And how much better for their guidance system and their empowerment for them to know, to match it up and go, oh, that's what it's like when someone's grumpy. That's what it's like when she's had a bad day. They're going to know you anyway. So at least you're teaching. Yeah. And you can also then show leadership of like, I just burst into tears over something really stupid. but I'm still here with you and I love you and you're safe and I can crack a joke right afterwards and I'm still connected with you, even though I behaved badly. And sometimes people do behave badly. And how do we deal with that?
Yeah.
You know, not as a way of like, I'm right and you're wrong, but as a way of like, we're both just, you know, human
And like,
together.
you know, if you gotta just kind of sit on the floor and like cry and just like sit on the floor and cry with your kid who's also crying, that's so fine. Like, don't feel bad about doing that sort of thing where if it's just like, I literally got nothing for this. So we're just gonna sit here and we're gonna have a moment and then we're gonna deal with it.
But the other thing I would add to that is that these moments are also moments of isolation and also a poverty of enough support, and maybe don't be so hard on ourselves. I think that we place such a burden on, especially on the mother, on the primary caregiver, whether it's whoever you are. There's so much of a burden on this person to be everything and hold everything, and we need the village and we don't have it. Most of us don't have it. And so I would just like lighten the burden of like, it's a normal sign of stress to lack the brain cells in those moments and get more support, you know. And I say peer support is how I survived. I could not have done this without peer support. So in the hardest places, I would just hold myself the best I could, which is a good thing to learn to do, to separate from our immediate reactivity, and then to get a session to reach out to peer support and have my feelings and work early. And then I would come back to Maggie and I'd be quite refreshed, and I'd have some to be able to say, you know, that interaction, you know, mommy was not behaving very well. Mommy was tired. Mommy got triggered. Like, and I would try to say it in a way that was appropriate for that age, you know, and in the end,
it's so amazing. Well, it's just so amazing that you're starting this journey with your kids so little. Yeah, it's so, because you're gonna have me. You're gonna have me, and you're gonna have this community we're building, so you won't have to feel like you're crazy. I know that's not a good term.
Well, that's
you
the
don't have
thing. We don't have that in our immediate, like, no, I don't know anybody else doing this. So that's
I haven't had that.
Yeah.
I've had Naomi. That's it. And then I met Vivek. And that's
right.
And ultimately, I would say it's okay. It'll be. It's that love. When I hear people talk about how much they love their kid and how they want to be close, just keep putting that first. And that's what's gonna come through.
Yeah, relationship first.
It's like, yeah. One of the things that always like weirds me out about other parenting styles or whatever is this emphasis on like teaching kids through emotional moments, and it always freaked me out to see, because, you know, I'd see videos like on TikTok really thinks that I'm a young mother, and I would see all these videos of people like showing off basically like teachable moments. And like, you know, how we, you know, talk about stuff during blah 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 when my kid is having a meltdown. And, you know, if that can be a teachable moment for you, great, but I think ultimately the emphasis should always be on connection first rather than anything else, including this idea that like, oh, this is a great opportunity. You know, if you as the parent are not the one freaking out in that moment and it's like a kid problem or like a meltdown problem, it's like just get down, just get in there.
Yeah, like when someone's having feelings, don't try to teach them anything, just be present.
Yeah. Save that for afterwards.
Nobody can learn when they're upset. Later. That's not helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you both. You're both so lovely. It's nice to get to know you, Cara.
So great to talk to you guys, because I always say to like when we have guests, it's like so rejuvenating. That's kind of what it is, you know. I've got one brain cell here. You gave me a couple more. It's like I can go back down now and be like, okay. I always feel like it's like we're in this together. Like I can do this. We can do this.
Thank you both so much.
This has been Your Kids Don't Suck. You can find me, Cara Tedstone, at www.caratedstonetherapy.com. and on Instagram at Cara Tedstone Therapy. On my website, you'll find links to recommended readings and a link to my Reparenting with Mindfulness workbook, available now on Amazon.
You can find me, Rythea Lee, at www.rythea.com. That's RYTHEA.com. There you'll find published books, articles, and music, and parenting videos. Also, I'm on TikTok at Rythea Lee, on Instagram at Rythea Lee. You can book parent mentoring sessions with me through my website. And also I have an Advice from a Loving Bitch YouTube show that helps people heal self-hatred, and that's rythea.com/advice. It is important and essential to put our voices, Rythea and Cara, in a context. We are two white, cisgendered, straight, middle-class women living with financial and societal privilege. Because of this, our perspectives are limited and do not reflect the realities of all of our listeners. This podcast will feature guests with expertise around conscious parenting who differ in race, class, abilities, sexual orientation, and histories from us, to broaden the conversation and reflect the lives of as many people as possible. 25% of the proceeds of this podcast will go to creators of color who have been mentors and influences on our work and in our growth as parents.
If you like our show, please subscribe and stay tuned for more conscious parenting advice and insights. And check out our link tree at linktr.ee/yourkidsdon'tsuck to donate and connect with us.